we are now showing you a schematic diagram of rolling. This is the operation of rolling, right? There is a roller here, there is a roller here, and this is a plate of some metal. When it goes through the roller, its thickness it starts to decrease, and of course its length and area will start to decrease. So this is a rolling operation. When there is a steel mill, for example, then it creates steels of different kinds, say in some thickness of a plate of say 0.5 meter thickness. And then inside the city we have a smaller steel mills called rolling or re-rolling plants. So here we take that thickness and we reduce it to our required thickness, because I need say a plate of only 1 inch thickness and this is 0.5 meter. So from that we will reduce through rolling process and so on. So this is a schematic. This is a schematic. But these pictures are actual microscopic pictures of the grain structure. So we took a small piece and took it to the microscope. We will tell you later on how do we do this experiment. And we did the microscopy, and this is how the grains look. Then here where the rolling almost starts to change the shape. So here if you can see the length is changing. Then here where more rolling has been done, they are longer. Then here, right? And finally here. So if you can see, there are standard large size grains. I mean, actually they are not large size, they are nanometer size, but grains are like this under the microscope. And under the same microscope, now the grains are very, very long needles. So you see, if rolling is being done, then because it is being rolled in this direction, it is being elongated. So the grains are also elongated like this. So this is what we told you, that with plastic deformation, the shape and size of the grains changes, especially in an operation like rolling, because in rolling all the grains are elongated, so the length of the grains becomes larger in rolling operation. In some other plastic deformation operation, the shape may change, but maybe not the length changes, maybe some other shape change happens. We were just talking of effect of plastic deformation on grains, right? That if plastic deformation is there, then what happens to the length of the grain, dimensions of the grain, grain size, grain diameter, and so on. This topic now is effect of cold work on strength. It is related, these topics are related, but the previous one was effect of plastic deformation on grains, that if you do plastic deformation, then what happens to the grains. Here, effect of cold work on strength, cold work. Now, if you remember, when we were doing the full stress strain diagram, right, at the end of the tensile test and everything, the full stress strain diagram, then we divided it into some portions, that this is the elastic portion, this is the yielding portion if there is a flat yield line, this is the strain hardening portion, and this is the necking region. So we already talked of the concept of strain hardening, that if you deform a material in the plastic zone, right, you apply enough load so that the deformation is a plastic nature now, that if you remove the load, some of the deformation will still remain, like not like in the elastic region where all the deformation will be gone. So if you load something in the plastic region, then offload it, remove the load, and then reload it, then we explain to you that the material's hardness and strength will be increased, right? So this is the same thing as we are saying here, that effect of cold work on strength. Cold means we do it at room temperature. If we do the same thing at a higher temperature, then this will not happen. But if we do this at room temperature, that we load it until it reaches the plastic region anywhere, then offload it, then load it again, then we have increased the strength. So why does this happen? Number of dislocations or dislocation density is increased by cold work, and dislocation movements are hindered, stopped by both grain boundaries and other dislocations. Right? We have talked of it a little bit earlier. I'll try to explain it again now, that we have not done the chapter on problems and difficulties that happen at the crystal structure level, right? But we have told you that one of the things that is there, one of the defects in the material that happen at the crystal level is called dislocation, right? So it is some type of defect. For now, this is enough. When you try to load a material, then the material moves. If there is any dislocation defect, that also moves. When it reaches a grain boundary, it stops. So the dislocation reaches the grain boundary, it stops. Now, because of this, the thickness or the size of the grain boundary increases. And we know that grain boundaries resist deformation. So now if the thickness or size of the grain boundary has increased, therefore this easy movement during deformation will decrease. And if there is another deformation, that also dislocation, that also will come and pile up on the grain boundary. So the size of the grain boundary will increase further. Right? This keeps on happening, and therefore two things happen, that dislocation movements are hindered by grain boundaries, and dislocation movements are hindered by other dislocations which stop there. Right? So because of this, that because of grain boundaries and because of dislocations, the movement of the material slows down and the strength increases. Right? So the strength of the metal increases by cold working or by strain hardening. So this is the topic, and we will further describe this on the next slide, where we are showing figure 645.